It was a quiet Sunday morning when I heard the knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. The coffee had just finished brewing, and I was still in my pajamas, scrolling through my phone with no plans for the day. When I opened the door, I saw Melissa, my next-door neighbor, standing there with a nervous smile and red-rimmed eyes like she'd been crying. Melissa and I weren't exactly close, but we had exchanged pleasantries over the years. She lived with her husband, Scott, and from the outside, they looked like the perfect suburban couple. She was always put together, always polite, and he was the kind of guy who nodded hello from across the driveway but never said much more. I remember thinking once or twice that something seemed off between them, but I chalked it up to people just being private. "Hi, Jason," Melissa said quietly, glancing around like she didn't want anyone to see her on my doorstep. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. "Sure, yeah, of course. Is everything okay?" She hesitated at the threshold, took a deep breath and stepped inside. She walked slowly into my living room and stood near the window, her arms crossed over her chest, and I could tell she was holding something back. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," she said, her voice shaking a little. "But I didn't know who else to talk to." I offered her a seat, poured her a cup of coffee, and waited patiently. She didn't say anything for a while, just stared into her cup, swirling the liquid like it held the answer to whatever was troubling her. Finally, she looked up at me with tearful eyes and said, "I need a huge favor. One that's going to sound insane, but I don't have anyone else I can trust." I leaned forward, trying to keep my expression calm. "Okay. What is it?" She swallowed hard. "I think Scott is cheating on me, and I need your help proving it." I blinked, completely caught off guard. I didn't expect that. "Wait, what? Why me?" "Because he doesn't know you." "Not really. He wouldn't suspect you of anything. And I need someone who can follow him or talk to him without raising any red flags. I need the truth, Jason. I can't live like this anymore." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. It felt like I'd just been pulled into a drama I had no part in, but the look in her eyes told me this wasn't just about curiosity. It was about survival. Melissa looked like she was on the verge of breaking. After a long pause, I said, "All right. Tell me everything you know." Over the next hour, Melissa laid it all out. Late nights at work that didn't make sense. Text messages he would hide. The sudden changes in behavior, how he stopped being affectionate, how he started treating her more like a roommate than a wife. She had no proof, just a gut feeling and 1,000 tiny red flags waving in her mind. "I don't want to accuse him without proof," she said, wiping away a tear. "But if he is cheating, I need to know. And if he's not, maybe I'm just losing it." I promised to help. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but something about the way she asked, it was desperate, raw. This wasn't some revenge plot. She wanted the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. So I started watching Scott. The next few days were strange. I adjusted my schedule a bit to match his comings and goings. I noticed he always left at 6:30 a.m., but a couple of times, instead of heading to work, he detoured into a quiet neighborhood 10 miles away. He'd park his car and disappear for an hour or two. Then he'd come back and drive to the office. I wrote everything down and told Melissa. Her hands trembled as she read my notes. "That's not on the way to his office," she said softly. "I've never even heard of that street." I offered to follow him again. That next morning, I trailed him from a distance. He pulled into the same neighborhood and parked in front of a house with blue shutters. A woman came out. She looked younger than Melissa, maybe mid-30s, dressed in yoga pants and a crop top. She smiled as Scott got out of his car, and then they kissed. Not a friendly peck, this was something else. I took photos from my phone and quietly drove away. My stomach was in knots. I wasn't sure what hurt more, seeing someone betrayed like that or knowing I had to hand over the evidence that would shatter her world. When I showed Melissa the photos, she didn't speak. She stared at them for a long time, then closed the folder and placed it on the coffee table. Her face was pale, but her voice was calm when she finally said, "Thank you." She left without another word. For a few days I didn't hear anything. I kept checking on her through the window, but the blinds were always closed. Then one evening she showed up at my door again. This time she looked different. Not broken, focused, determined. I confronted him, she said. He denied it. Said I was being paranoid. So I showed him the photos. What did he say then? She let out a bitter laugh. He got angry. Said I had no right to spy on him. That I was the one who broke his trust. I was stunned. Are you serious? Oh yeah. He flipped it on me. Said I was insecure and that I ruined our marriage by involving someone else. We sat in silence for a while. He's staying with his sister, she said. But it's over. I filed for divorce this morning. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me was relieved for her, but I could tell this wasn't a happy ending. This was a storm she was still walking through. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, meeting my eyes. You didn't have to help me, but you did. And that gave me the strength to stop living in a lie. After that night we started talking more. Not about Scott, not about what happened, just life. We'd have coffee together, talk about work, the weather, random things. Something shifted between us. There was a closeness that hadn't been there before. Weeks passed. Her divorce moved forward. Scott never came back, and from what I heard, he moved in with the woman from the blue-shuttered house. Melissa didn't cry about it. At least not in front of me. She focused on rebuilding her life piece by piece. One night we were sitting on my porch, sipping wine, the air warm and still. She looked over at me and said, "You know, that favor you did for me, it changed everything." Smiled. I didn't do much. No, she said. You did everything. You gave me truth. And in a world full of lies, that's the most powerful thing anyone can give. We sat in silence after that, watching the stars come out, the weight of the past finally starting to lift. Months later we began dating. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't born out of the mess she came from. It was slow, patient, and real. We both carried scars, but we didn't pretend to be perfect. We just promised to be honest. Looking back, I still remember that morning. The knock on the door, the tremble in her voice, the way her life was hanging on a thread. And I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small, a favor, a simple yes, could change the course of two lives forever. Because the day my neighbor asked me for a life-changing favor was the day both our lives began again. And this time it was built on truth. Not every story ends in heartbreak. Sometimes it ends in healing. And sometimes, just sometimes, it ends in love.